Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far in, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps me out a lot. I'd also love to hear comments in the comment section down below if you have something you want to say. I was thinking about how a lot of people set sea glass the other day, and my wife had this bag of shells, and I thought I bet I could set one of those shells in kind of a cool pendant. So I thought today maybe I'd give that a shot. So I picked one out of the bag that I think would make a good pendant, and I'm going to try and set that. It's got some interesting kind of purplish red tones in the shell, so I'm gonna use a little Cabochon ruby to put on the bail, and I'm going to do a little hinge bail on it. So before we get started on that, though, I need to thank some people. I wanted to thank my patrons over on Patreon. They've signed up for the various tiers over there, and I appreciate their financial support as well as the great ideas and the community they've built over there. That's really kind of a nice place now. The other group is my YouTube subscribers. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you subscribe. We're getting close to 8,000 pretty soon. I think we're at 7,800 or so. So maybe you want to add yourself to that list. I'd love to have you. Lots of content here. I wanted to thank them for all of their nice comments and the financial contributions they make on occasion, and especially those people who buy me a coffee that provides me with cash to buy supplies, so I really appreciate that. So with that being said, let's get started on this project. Okay, so let me show you the little shell that I found. It's pretty small. See how it's got that nice kind of purplish brown, almost a burgundy color, I guess. And he's about 20-ish millimeters tall. It's pretty square, actually 20 millimeters wide. So not a huge shell, but I think it'll make for a nice little pendant. I thought this Ruby Cab went pretty well with it. So we'll put him up on the bail. And let's take a look at what I drew up here. This is a design idea book I have available on my merch store. There's several different cover designs. What I like about them is they have this grid in the background that helps me to keep things symmetrical, which is not something I'm great at, just freehand. So check those out on the merch store. That helps me out, and it also helps you out. So this is basically what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a prong setting sitting on an open base for the shell to sit on, and I want to hinge that, and I'm going to mirror the shell shape and try and do some kind of decoration to make the striations match as well, and put that bezel set Cabochon ruby right above it there with a hinge between them. I'm going to put a jump ring on either side of this, and then we'll have a split chain that comes down and attaches to it. And I think that hinge will give it a little movement, which is always nice on a pendant. So I'm going to use some little thin tube that fits 18 gauge round wire as a pin. For that, I'll put that find that measurement for you in a minute. And like I said, 18 gauge makes a great pin for that. Probably going to use 16 gauge square wire to put a little base there. And then I have some flattened 12 gauge wire that I ran through the rolling mill. You could also just pound it flat with a hammer if you can do it consistently. Or you could use sheet. Either way. This is, you know, I rolled this pretty thin, so it looks like it's about the same thickness as maybe 22 gauge sheet, I think. So I'm going to wrap that around the base there. Now I have a little bit asymmetrical top here. So for the very top of this little platform, I'm going to use a piece of 18 gauge sheet and cut that so it matches the top of the shell a little bit better, and we'll be able to have a flat surface on the top to mount that tubes for the hinge on there. So alright, so let's start, I think, let's start with making the little platform for this thing. So here's some 16 gauge square, and I think I'm just going to file the end flat to start with, and then I'm going to start trying to make it the same exact shape as the shell here, with the exception of the top, because I'm going to use that piece of 18 gauge at the top, I think. So let's file the end flat. And I think most of this is just going to be kind of freehand forming. So let me do it on top of it. Kind of looking where I'm going away from the shell and then using that as the point where I grab it in order to get a bend that kind of goes where I want it to go. So like right here it separates there, so I'll grab it there as a fulcrum point. I'm just kind of bend it in like this. See where we're at then. I'm going to cut it off a little long, and then I'll be able to fine-tune the shape, I think. It's easy to overbend stuff like this because a small bend makes quite a difference, because that got it pretty close right there, but now you can see it separates right about there. So I need to kind of start bending right there, or holding it right there anyway. Now, part of this is going to be done beneath that as a base for the shell there as well, but I want it to have a flat top, and so I'm going to cut a little strip of this that's a little bit wider, that sticks out a little bit higher than a piece of the 16 gauge that's butted up against their wood. So I'm going to cut those a little bit shorter, and then we'll put something across it. Well, it'll be easier to trace it out once we solder them together, but so I think I'm going to solder those two together next. If you haven't seen my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder for almost everything, and I use a spray-on flux called My-T-Flux. So this was just some scrap 18 gauge I had in my box over there. So let's cut a couple of pieces of solder. Something I also do that not a lot of people do for as much as I do it anyway, is called pick soldering, and it allows you to pick up an individual piece of solder and place it pretty precisely where you want it. So if you're interested in that, put a link to my video about that up above. It's one of those skills that really moves you forward in the discipline of making jewelry, I think, and soldering. See how I picked that piece up? That little ball up. I picked that little piece up and it balled up on the end of the pick there. And I just have to heat this up to the soldering temperature. And then I can do it on the other side over here. It's quite good. Okay. Here is my gloriously messy sawing area, and what I did was I laid the shell on top of this after I soldered it, after I colored that purple, and then I scratched a line where the border is. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that shape out, and then I'm going to create
a little lip that sticks up around the entire thing, and then solder this piece back onto the top there. So this will make it so I have exactly the right profile, at least pretty close, to get it back. We're back to the regular area, and this is that piece of 12 gauge that I ran through the rolling mill to flatten it. And I think I'm going to start kind of over here. And maybe just to make sure we keep things lined up, let's keep a spot where we started, marked across both of them. Just kind of try and line that up every time right there. I think it might be easiest to solder this together first and then slide it over here. Could be wrong about that, but I guess we'll find out. What happened there was I had this side hot enough, but not this side quite hot enough. So when I brought the solder up here, it jumped onto the one side, but not the other. So I had to bring back a second piece and make sure they were both up to the right temperature before I touched it. So I can tell I got way too much still. So I'm gonna cut it right where I soldered it and take a little piece out, and we'll try it again. To get it fitting in there, you want to make sure everything's sitting nice and flat. Don't want any wobbles in our base, because your shell is going to be sitting on that. So you want it to fit in there nicely. Go all the way at the bottom here. Let's solder that in there. I think I have plenty of solder up here probably. So I'm going to make this in position it in a shape that I can set that right on top of. That should work. Let's throw this one in here just for good measure. Pretty good. Right, I'm probably going to have to Dremel this to make it a little bigger. So I'll be right back after I shape that a little bit so it fits right on there. So I got it kind of shaped so that'll fit in there. It's just adding that little piece in the middle there made it have to be widened a little bit in spots, so I did that. Now we should be able to solder it in there. So part of the reason I wanted to do it this way was so that I'd have a nice flat edge up here. I want the center of the shell to be straight below that, so I'm going to try and do a line kind of straight across there. Does that look straight? Looks pretty straight to me. I think that'll be good. Okay. So that's one problem solved. Okay, grab some of that tubing. Tubing, I looked it up, is 1.73 millimeters outside diameter silver tubing with 3 millimeter thick wall, and that's the size that fits 18 gauge wire pretty well. So I'm going to cut a couple of pieces off of this, two about that long, so I'll be right back. Okay, there's two pieces. That one's going to be for the top part that's going to have this other design on top. This one will just solder right to the top of this piece of sheet I just put on here. So let's do the first one. And we got to come back and I need to put some prongs on top of this little lip. I think I'm going to file the lip down just a skosh. So let's do this. Show you a pretty flat spot over here. I'm going to pick a little bit of solder onto the outside of this, flux them, after fluxing them both, and then just put it on there and solder it to it. You really don't want to get any solder inside the tube when you're doing a hinge, because I want to solder that pin in on the edges. And then and if you have some solder on the inside, your pin will solder into places you don't want it to, unfortunately. Let's just put a little bit of solder on the side of this. You also don't want to pick these up with the tweezers while they're hot. Pretty easy to squish. You don't want to squish your tube. There's a lot more mass in this bottom piece than the tube, so I'm going to focus most of the heat there. With a little luck, we should get flowage all the way down the length of that. There we go. We'll find a little piece of 18 gauge round. That's 18. Oh, still goes in there, so we're good. We didn't have anything solder in there. So now we have to put some prongs on here. I think since it's a little shell, I don't want to use anything that's too thick. I have this little piece of 16 gauge round left. Let me see if I can, let's cut that in half. I'm just going to put a little dip right in the middle of one of these with the half round. Alright, so we'll solder it into an X shape like that. I have plenty of solder up here. Okay. So I kind of want to figure out where I'm going to put these prongs. It looks like right here. So I bend them down about right there. Let's see what happens. That would actually be pretty good if I went that route. Okay, so the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sweat some solder onto the bottom of these little feet, and then we'll just solder it on there. So let's cut a little bit more solder. Take a moment to get this positioned just how I want it. Alright, well, let's give that a try. I think we'll get 3 of them. This one needs to go down a little bit. So let's get 3 of them, and then I'll move that one down into contact, and we'll solder the second time. Yeah, a little bit of a shift. I had a little bit of this thing shifted on me. That doesn't usually happen when I do this, so I'm going to just cool this off. I just really need to make sure that the one that shifted, that these guys are touching the spot on the band where I want them to. And kind of be pushing down into it actually is best. That looks pretty good. Let's give that another shot. The trick with these kind of things is you're trying to get that bottom piece hot, which has more mass than the other one, without overheating the top. Okay, so now I need to figure out what I'm going to design this thing out of. I want this to kind of mirror the shape of the shell a little bit. I think there might be enough of this one. This is some more of that 16 gauge square. So let's do that. Let's see if we can make this look like a shell, sort of. looks pretty good. Let's file this flat. And then I'm going to solder this to that.
See something now.
I do want to take a look. I made a bezel for that. If you're interested in seeing how to make a basic bezel, I'll put a link right up there for you. This is just a short bezel to go. I'm going to go right kind of at the base there. So I think that'll look cool. We'll see. Gauge there to kind of create that little fan shape. Let's see if we can do that. The trick is to get these to solder together without all these things, the surface tension of the solder wicking it together. So I'm going to try and do it real quick with just a little tiny bit of solder. The base of this is going to be hidden underneath that stone. So to start with, I'm going to kind of pull them all close together, if I can. I think next step, let's solder this to the base there like that, and then I'm going to cut those off and solder them on the inside. And look at the shells, there's little striations. So I think I'm going to scallop the edge a little bit. So this is going to get soldered on right there. So I think that might be the next thing we should do. In order to do that, I'm going to sweat a little bit of solder on the back of the bezel. Okay, two things left to do for this little guy. I need to put a couple of jump rings opposite each other on this. Looks pretty straight. Okay, one last thing before we let these two pickle for a little bit. Let's solder on that tube. We get to decide where to cut this exactly. That looks like that's pretty good. So I think what I'll do is I'll make it purple again. And I'll use that as a guide for where to cut. Okay, so I'm just going to take the jeweler's saw, cut that little piece of tubing out, and then I'll file it down a little bit so that there's some room for this tube to move in there. And then we should be able to piece the pieces together. And then we'll have our little hinge, but we'll still have to solder the pin in there at the end. And we'll pickle a little bit before we do that. Okay, that fits in there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to file this downwards a little bit, this direction, in order to allow that some freedom of movement. If you have it in there too tightly, it won't move very well. There we go. It looks a little lopsided right now because I haven't cut this excess off on either side. So I think probably though I'm ready to pickle this for a while. We want to get rid of any excess flux that's left over because I'm just going to use, this is one of the few times I use easy solder. I'm going to easy solder this right here, the edge of the pin over here and here, and I don't really want a lot of it flowing along the pin. So we're going to try and get rid of any excess flux by pickling it for a while. So just going to cut this off. Don't need near that long. And then I'll throw the pickle. So we'll be back in a minute. So I let it pickle for a little while, just enough to get rid of most of that flux. And this is one of the few times I also dab on a little bit of flux, so I'm going to put a little bit on the table there. I took a toothpick and bit the end off of it, so it's kind of a little brush-like. Let's, I'm going to put some right there and right there, but that's the only place. Okay, got some flux on there. This is easy solder, which is the only other type of solder I ever use. And I only use it rarely. But it gives you just a little bit better chance of not accidentally soldering that pin in all the way down the length so that it won't move. Alright, let's pick up a little piece of this here. See how little I use it based on how tarnished it is. I think I bought that piece 25 years ago. I think we got that side over there. I don't think we got this side. Oh, we still got movement. That's what I wanted to see. So I'm going to pickle that, and then we'll cut the prongs off, and I'll get everything polished, and then we'll set the... I'll probably set the garnet in there. You can check out that other video, like I said, about making bezels for stones to do that. And then I will show you putting the shell in the setting that we've created here. So, all right, so let's let that pickle for a while. I'm back, and I'll show you the things that I've done. As I did quite a bit of polishing. I went ahead and set this little ruby up here, and now the only other thing I did was I cut that cage down that was on top of this into just 4 prongs. I used my rotary tool to kind of smooth them out on the inside so they're flat, and then I thinned them out from the outside and tapered them to a point using Dremel abrasive bits. And I'll use kind of a polishing bit after I get the shell put in there, just to smooth out the tops of those a little bit. So I'm not 100% sure I can leave them that long or should leave them that long, but for now I'm going to push them down. I'm going to try and be real careful with this shell because I have broken a few things in my life. Just basically pushing those down kind of carefully. Alright, that doesn't really move very much. So I just took 2 9-inch pieces of chain and put jump rings on the end of them. Except for one of them I put an old clasp I found from an old broken chain on. See how close we got to my original plan here? Kind of like that. That's basically what I was thinking. So I think that turned out okay. You know, sometimes when I try these things that I've never done, I like them, sometimes I don't. I think I like this one. So, alright, I will do that little final bit of cleaning up with a rotary tool, and I'll take some better pictures of it and put them at the end.
Okay, well that was a little seashell and ruby pendant. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button before you leave. That really helps my channel a lot. I'd also love it if you'd take a moment and look through the video list. I have over 250 videos. I think it's more than 260 now. I'll have to check. And also lots of content at different skill levels. If you're trying to learn this from the beginning, then there's some beginning stuff. If you're just looking for ideas or different techniques, there's lots of that stuff for people who have more experience with it. So check those out. Subscribe to my channel. And then don't forget to hit the video description down below for the various links that are relevant to my channel. That includes my Buy Me a Coffee link, merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea books. There's a link to my website if you want to see some jewelry for sale. And finally, there's a link to my Patreon. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care. Happy silversmithing.